And we are live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Daytripper Photo Show. Tonight we have a great guest on. We have Don Komarechka. Don is known for so many types of photography, but today he's going to give his expertise on lenses, which is what the show is about. We're going to talk about using lenses. Actually, we're calling it seeing beyond your lens. So the idea is we're each going to have a lens that we've already chosen. We're going to try, we've tried a whole bunch of different things with these lenses. We're going to show you our experiences. We're going to talk about what was good, what was bad about the lens, and show you some pictures that we've made with those lenses to give you an idea of how you could use lenses differently than you may normally use them. We're kind of revisiting a concept that we've done a few times, but it's been a while. And, of course, there's so many new community members now that we thought we'd revisit it, have a closer look at lenses, and hopefully it'll be a lot of fun. Each person on the panel has chosen a specific lens. We're going to talk about what we think, as I said a few seconds ago, what we're going to think. We're going to discuss the pros and the cons, places that you could use that lens, and, of course, share some photos. So it's going to be fun with that. Now, I mentioned Don a few seconds ago, and when I think of optics, glass, the technical side of lenses, the first person I think of is this guy right here. Don, how are you?
I am very well, and it's so funny you mentioned optics. I don't know if I can actually show it to everybody here, but I have in my possession a very interesting prototype lens adapter that I have to keep hush-hush, I think, for at least a little while. But yeah, I love experimenting. I love having fun with optics, trying different things, using a lens in a way that you might not have intended, or trying to find its limitations and pushing past them. That's what I enjoy in photography, yeah.
You're not allowed to talk about that special lens that you teased everybody with just a second ago?
Nope.
Okay, all right.
Not publicly.
That's something that people look forward to that. So it's actually really cool. He showed us a few seconds ago, and I'll shut up. So yeah, it's really cool that you wanted to come back on the show. Thank you so much for doing that. And of course, though, we're always lucky to have our regular hosts, Navi, Gabriel. Guys, how's it going?
Hello.
Gabe, Navi. I did the camera thing backwards with you. I don't know. I was on Gabriel when Navi said hi, and I was on Navi. Oh. Anyway, Navi, you've had some big news this week.
Yeah, it's been a pretty interesting week.
Yeah, a couple things.
Yeah, I got engaged. Sounds
Whoa,
weird.
what?
Yeah, on Saturday, so.
That's great.
Pretty excited about that. I do not have a ring because it's being sized at the moment, but feels good.
It's nice. It's a very nice ring.
It's so blingy, isn't it?
Bling bling.
Yeah, so that happened. Major milestone, I guess. And I also got a job teaching photography at Sheridan College.
Wow,
also,
fantastic.
Yeah,
congratulations.
I'm like mashing on the clap sound effect, but nothing's happening. It's a sound effect fail.
No, I had nothing to do with it. I didn't mute your sound effects, I swear.
That was Brian's weak clap, so.
Yeah, I gave a little clap. But no, congratulations on both of them. That's really cool.
Yeah.
It helps having that degree, doesn't it, Navi?
You know what? My mom will be so proud that I'm actually putting it to use now, so. Can't wait to, like, see, it's not just collecting dust anymore. Officially.
Well, that's awesome. Congratulations on both things, and of course, as always, wish Devin our best as well. Your fiancé.
Weird, right?
Yeah, it's weird. Well, it isn't. I mean, you've been with the guy forever, so I mean, it was bound to happen eventually.
But we're still like, joke. Well, we'll see. So this is extra weight on my finger. I'm like itchy, but.
And the complaints already begin.
Just so.
Actually, it's funny. Blake just chimed in the Q&A. He says, "Congratulations, Navi. I pity your wedding photographer." Laugh out loud.
No one's really asking when is the wedding. Everyone's asking, who's going to shoot the wedding. So, Dev and I decided we're just going to go with a selfie stick for it. So.
Awesome. That's great. Selfie stick.
Yeah.
Have disposable cameras on everybody's table.
Yeah, it's fine. We'll be fine like this. So.
Yeah, you don't need to hire somebody. I mean, that's
crazy talk. I'd rather get really fancy chairs or something. So.
Just put disposable film cameras on all the tables.
There you go.
There you go.
We did that at our wedding. We had 5 pictures that were in focus, and 3 of them were of a bottle of ketchup.
Yeah, my grandmother did the same thing when she got married, and she was 84 years old. None of them turned out, as far as I know. Julie and Tammy both say congratulations,
Oh,
Navi.
thanks, guys.
Cool. All right, so just a reminder, what's going on right now, the Q&A part of this show, if you have any questions, if you want to share your experiences with lenses, if you just want to chime in and say, hi, I'm watching the show, go right ahead, use the Q&A. If you don't know where it is, hover your mouth over the Hangout, go over to the left side, it's about the third or fourth option down, depending on your screen, it says Q&A. Click it. On the right side, you can type in your comments, and we'll say howdy. Of course, we might not get to it right away, but if there's something that comes up that relates to the topic we have in our notes, we'll put that in at that time, so we'll get to you. Don't worry, don't worry. And of course, before we get to the meat and potatoes of the show, I just want to remind everybody, if you're watching us on YouTube, click like on this video. Let the people know that you actually enjoy our show, because we have a great time doing it. And also, subscribe to our channel. That way, every time we do a new show, you don't have to watch it live. You'll get an update that we've done the show, and you'll be able to watch it then. Of course, I would like to thank our sponsors, and there's a little story I have for this. LensPen, of course, has been sponsoring our show for quite a while. This past Saturday, I did a whole sensor cleaning session at Henry's. If you spent $50, I would do a full clean on your sensor and show you how to do it. But before that, I gave an entire class, a 1-hour class on how to clean your sensor and how to do it properly without worrying about scratching things and so on. So every single sensor I cleaned required only 2 tools, well, 3. A sensor loop, which is a magnifying loop that you put over the thing so you can see your sensor, a blower, which helps, and this little LensPen sensor pen. These come in a kit, $60. You get the pen, the loop, and the blower. And the little pad goes right on your sensor, and you can clean it off nicely. Not too much pressure, does a good job. But LensPen makes some great product, and this is just one of them, and it worked really well for our entire sensor cleaning presentation. Now, there are some, and I know, Don, you use the swabs when you clean your sensor. And sometimes, you know, that's a better way to go because you have stuff that's actually stuck to the sensor and it's harder to get off. But most of the time, guys, realistically, you don't need to go to that extent. Now, Don, you do crazy focus stacking, so I would imagine even minute dirt on a sensor would be a lot more noticeable.
Yeah, you wouldn't even see. You know, there's a trick that if I can go on one slight tangent here, Brian. So if anybody wants to see how much dust is on their camera sensor, bring up just like Notepad or Word or just something like white on your computer screen. So you just have this big white screen. Take your camera, set the aperture to its smallest possible aperture, you know, f22, sometimes f32 or whatever the smallest is. Set the focus on the camera to infinity and get in close to the monitor to have it as out of focus as possible. And then take a picture. So then you just get like completely out of focus. It's all uniform. It should all be the same brightness. And then you take that into Photoshop. And in Photoshop, if you can do a levels adjustment, and I wish I had an example of this ready, but you take the left and right-hand sides of the level adjustment and you bring it towards the peak somewhere in the middle where middle gray is, where most of the image should probably be exposed to. So you're taking all of the rest away, and now all you're going to see is deviations from that middle gray, and any possible dust spot will shine. Like, it will be clearly obvious that it's there. And so when I do sensor cleanings and things like that, I do that as a test, both before and after cleaning, and see if there's anything still remaining. And then if there's still more, then I clean again and sort of reiterate until it's spotless. But I mean, the way that I clean, you'll get rid of oil and stuff on a camera sensor, which is not common at all. But you know, if you've got a lubrication problem with the reflex mirror, then you know you can sometimes get little oil spots on the sensor. Little things like that, you need to take it up a notch. But 9 times out of 10, you know, something like a LensPen cleaner would work just fine, and it's probably a lot faster to use too.
Yeah, and of course, doing the sensor clean, I had both. I had the swabs there if I needed it, and luckily didn't need it this time. Last time I did one, some guy tried to clean his sensor. I swear to God, it looked like he licked his sensor. And yeah, I had to get the swabs out and I had to do it right. But anyway, that was a fun thing, and thank you again, LensPen. This week we're still having our photo challenge from last week, which Don chose for us, which was curves. So the winner of our curves photo challenge, which will be told next week on our show when we do our review, will win the LensPen Sidekick and LensPen kit. Pretty cool stuff. Before we get into it, Heather says she's watching the show. Hello, Heather. And of course, Joe says congratulations, Navi. And Maureen is wondering who got hitched.
Nobody yet.
No, Navi just got engaged to Devin, and that's great news. So congratulations again, Nav. And we're going to move on. Okay, so today we're talking about some really cool stuff. The point of tonight's show is to show you how lenses can be fully utilized, and I think that's the big key, right? So many of us will take our lens and we'll say, well, all right, I'm guilty of this. Don, we just went to Camp 30 a few weeks ago, I didn't bring a lot of stuff because I know me, and I know that if I had brought my 50 mil and my 24-85 and my 70-300 and, you know, flashes and this and that, I'd be so interested in choosing kit that I wouldn't shoot. I've done it. I do it all the time. You guys ever do that?
Yes.
You just have so much stuff.
I did a little bit of that while we were at Camp 30, Brian, because I brought the whole kitchen sink with me.
Well, you had three cameras. You had everything.
You know, I was switching around different camera bodies and lenses and doing some experimental stuff. I had a lot of fun, but I was juggling gear for half the time.
And this is the problem. So the show today is basically to say, you have a lens, try some different things with it and really get out and experiment with it. So I asked you guys if you could choose your lenses. Now, Gabriel, actually, Don picked first. Don picked the fisheye lens. Now, which fisheye lens did you choose, Don?
Well, I mean, any fisheye lens per se. You know, I've got some images that I'll show from both the Canon 15mm fisheye and the 8 to 15mm fisheye, which can make a full image circle and things like that. So either one, you know, you don't want to commit yourself just to one when you're dealing with a concept, more or less.
Gotcha.
But there you go.
Cool. All right, so that's awesome stuff. A zoom fisheye and a prime fisheye. Gabriel, of course, picked the 100mm macro lens, but was quickly booted from it by Navi when she stole it and said, no.
I did not steal it.
She's mean when she's angry.
I didn't want this. So I was just going to respond. So I was like, oh, that's fine. I'll just respond later. And then you beat me too. It's like, damn.
So now Navi has the 100mm Canon macro, and Gabriel has the 70-200 f2.8, and I'm talking about my favorite lens, the Nifty 50. So pretty much always use this lens when I'm not actually doing other things. When I'm just playing around, if I'm just shooting for myself, it's all a 50. But we'll talk about that more in just a second. So why don't we get into this? Don, I'm surprised actually, before we do, of course, my first thought when we talked about this, I thought Don would choose the MPE 65 Canon Super Macro. But no.
But yeah, the reason why is because it's not a very versatile lens. It's not a lens that can do many things beyond what it's intended for. It can do some magical stuff, don't get me wrong, and I use that lens all the time. But it's not something that I can recommend to say, okay, here, go and experiment and sort of draw outside the lines with it, because you'll fail.
Yeah. It's true. The first time I tried to use that lens, I was using it in Henry's in the store, and you got to have so much light, and it's such shallow depth of field. It's so tough to use. So, yeah, I get that.
You see how dirty everything is. Dirty and dusty.
Yeah, you know, you think something's clean, you're wrong. No,
Don't.
Unless you're in a clean room and you're in one of those bunny suits when they're making like semiconductors and things like that, that's probably one of the only clean places on the planet.
Which is another good reason to have a lens pen.
Yay!
The brushes work really well for cleaning macro. Shut up, Brian. Okay, moving along. Or the blower, yeah, exactly. But Navi, why don't you start today? Why don't you go into a few things? I'll ask you a question. First off, when you think of a 100mm macro lens, what's the first thing that you think people would use that for?
Macro. Because it's in the title.
That's a good point. So when you say macro, what are you talking, like bugs, flowers?
I don't really do bugs. They gross me out. So maybe, you know, some flowers, and I think just things around the house at that magnification, it's kind of interesting to see how it looks, and everything looks different. Like it's like a whole new world looking at things that close up, and you see how dusty things are. So, you know, I should clean my desk more often. Yeah.
Or just stop shooting macros at your desk.
Well, there's crap on it. Or my kitchen. Or Henry's.
Yeah.
Okay, now how do you like to use the 100mm macro?
I've used it for macro and as a sort of semi-telephoto. I don't own a 70-200. This is why I thought it was better suited for Gabriel, because I know he really likes that lens. I use the 70-200 for, you know, my wedding stuff, but I don't use it on like it's not my lens of choice for things. So having the macro, it kind of gives me that, you know, telephoto, mid-telephoto length, much smaller and lighter than your 70-200 2.8. And, you know, I can do my portraits, and I can kind of do those shots where it's just bride's eyes in focus with everything else really soft and really, you know, creamy, nice bokeh looking. And it's super lightweight. So I've used it for portraits and, you know, mid-telephoto Not too much macro, surprisingly.
I mean, that's the first thing people think of. I'm going to use it for coins and stamps and close-up stuff. But no, I mean, that focal length, and that's really what it comes down to. It's a sharp lens. It's about a 100 mil, and you use it on the full-frame camera?
Yes, I use it on the 5D Mark III.
So yeah, full frame. It's a 100 millimeter lens. On a crop sensor, that's about a 160 millimeter lens. So again, even shallower depth of field. But that macro lens is so sharp. You can get such great detail.
Yeah, so it's super, super sharp. You know, even wide open 2.8-3.5, it's incredibly sharp. So I wanted that quality, you know, but not have to carry around this 5-pound lens of the 70-200. So I've used it quite a bit in situations where I need to grab a quick, you know, headshot or something of a bride or whatever, and there's not much light. Throw that on, off I go. So
what are some other pros of the lens?
So it's super sharp. It's pretty quiet. It does have ISO. You can kind of hear a bit of a buzzing when you have it on. It's a 2.8, so super fast for any low light stuff. And it's really light. That's another thing. I don't like carrying a lot of heavy stuff. You know, like for us girls, it's like having a 5D, a full frame camera, and then a 70-200 plus a flash on top. You're just carrying around this, you know, setup all day. It kind of gets a little bit tiring. So it's nice to have something lightweight. And because it's so versatile, you can take it out. I usually take this and maybe my 24-70, and I'm pretty good for the whole day. I'm just kind of walking about, you know. Yeah, the sharpness is incredible.
Yeah, it's always good when you can keep your kit low. We were just talking a few seconds ago about, you know, when you go on these trips, you carry everything with you and you get so confused. So the less you can carry with you, the better, right?
When I have, like, you know, all my gear, I spend more time thinking about what do I want to use, you know, and I want to, because I brought everything, I feel like I should use everything because I made the effort to carry that stupid weight around, you know.
So true. So
true. Unless you have people carrying my stuff for me, then I'm like, whatever. Bring all that film, they'll never shoot. So.
Yeah, really. Okay, so give me some cons. What don't you like about the lens?
Price maybe for some people. I think retail goes for about $1,000 or maybe $1,100, something around there. So. I mean, if you're not doing a whole lot of macro photography, there are cheaper options. There's the 100 mil non-L version, which is, you know, almost half the price if you're kind of just dabbling with macro photography. So the price is kind of up there, but you are getting the L series quality. Focus can be a little slow sometimes if you have the image stabilizer on, and it does, you know, I find that it does search a little bit. So usually if I'm trying to do a quick shot handheld of food or something, it might just be faster for me to manually focus it and do that.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, that's how you shoot your snowflakes, isn't it? All manual focus. Looks like Don might have frozen.
Oh.
It's all right, Don. He'll figure it out. He'll come back. So go ahead.
Yeah. So to get the most accurate focus, you know, usually sometimes it's better to be manually focusing. But I think the slow focusing happens more so if you are trying to shoot closer. When I've used it for, you know, sort of mid-telephoto, it's been pretty quick. And other cons, that's all I can think of.
I think the biggest con is the price.
Yeah, like I've used a lot of other macro lenses, but honestly, for the sharpness, can't beat it. Like this is one of my favorite lenses right now. So.
Yeah, and that's the funny thing. Like everybody knows that Daytripper Photo uses Sigma lenses on day trips, and you know, we love Sigma stuff. But there's a couple where I would still say stick to the brand name, and the 100 millimeter macro from Canon or the 105 from Nikon, I think still kind of shine over the aftermarket macros. Would you agree with that?
I would agree. Yeah, because I've used pretty much all of them. I've used the Sigma 100 mil. Oh, 100 mil. There's a
105.
105.
Sigma 105.
Yeah, Tamron 90 mil as well, which is a pretty, you know, decent option for the price, and the Nikon and the Canon. But overall, I think I like the Canon better, even over the Nikon.
Yeah. Well, you've got some photos.
I asked you that because I played with the 105 a lot when I did jewelry photography, and I don't know if it's just my bias because I'm a Canon shooter, but I found the Canon 100 to be sharper than the 105 Nikon that I was using.
Yeah, I think it's pretty close, but I do prefer the look of the Canon better.
It's nice being us, isn't it, guys? We get to actually try out all these things and compare a 105 Nikon and a 100 Canon. That's so cool.
Yeah, I think for someone who maybe is thinking about getting a macro lens, rent it. Like, really, the world, take it on a weekend and test it out, because you will notice the differences between the different lenses. And plus, for people who are doing macro, there are different focal lengths for macro lenses, right? There's a 100mm, the 60mm in Canon, and there's an 85.
There's a 135 or something, I think there is.
Yeah, so it depends on what you're shooting, what your subject is, because the longer the focal length, the farther away you can be from your subject. So if you're shooting bugs and stuff, you may not want to be, or you're shooting a scorpion, and you don't want really bothering it. So shooting flowers or something that doesn't move, then you'll be fine.
And also the Sigmas have the 150 and the 180 macros, and I know when we're doing our Birds of Prey session on Sunday, those are two that people are going to be using as like a telephoto.
Yeah.
So, and get that sharpness from the macro.
135, you said, Sigma? I think I used that one on your falconry, Birds of Prey, sorry.
Probably the 150.
Yeah, so that was really nice too, because I shot a couple of shots of the owl and it was really, really sharp.
Yeah, and you're not right in its face.
Right.
Okay, Navi, show us a few photos that you made with the 100mm.
Okay, so let me do one of these. So I use the macro for the ring shots a lot. I don't know. Oh, shoot, you can't see that. Hold on.
Yeah, wrong window.
There we go. All right,
Oh,
so
nice.
Your ring shot for what I know. Us girls, we want to see our rings.
Is that your ring?
No, it's not. This was actually Phil's.
Oh.
Phil Zerato's fiance, I should say. So, so that was her ring. So this is actually on a flower. That was just outside of our house, so we just kind of put it on there and took a couple shots.
Yeah, you have to be so careful with focus. I mean, 1 millimeter back in the front gem isn't in focus anymore.
Yeah, so you really have to actually, assuming you have enough light, you want to be stopping down to make sure you get all those little parts in focus there. That's an example of a macro shot.
Just going to welcome Don back to the Hangout.
Sorry about that, guys. My computer was doing too many things in the background.
Oh. Yeah, that's kind of what my computer likes to do as well. I'm worried about that, actually. I'll do my screen share.
Doesn't explode.
Wow.
So this is another macro shot. Just a bunch of spices and stuff that I was going to be cooking with. So I don't even remember what is what, but we got some salt there, I think. Salt, maybe some turmeric, some powder of some sort. I don't remember.
I can't tell you. If I told you, I'd have to kill you.
So you can really see the little individual grains, and I don't think I was even as close as I could have been for this, because I wanted to make sure I got everything in the frame. That's another macro example. Another sort of just used as a mid-range or a portrait shot is...
See, that's the thing that a lot of people get confused about. What is a portrait lens? I mean, we've done shows with Ross on what is a portrait lens and so on. And a portrait lens could be a lot of different focal lengths, but classically it's known as something, let's say, between 75 millimeter or longer. Would you guys agree with that?
Yep.
So?
Yeah. Okay, so the 100 millimeter macro applies.
Yep. So this is a wedding that I shot in December. I didn't have, I think it was just away from my camera bag, and I was doing some detail stuff, and I only had the 100mm, so we just quickly did a couple shots, and turned out great. I didn't have to run over to my bag and grab my 24-70, and because it's creates such a shallow depth of field, I kind of like that look better for some portraits as opposed to the 24-70.
Well, in a photo like this, if the background was too much in focus, the chair would be a focal point, and the curtain behind, and so on.
Yeah, so this was your portrait shot there. And then just another... Oh, it's just to show the depth of field here. It can be pretty shallow. You have to be really careful of what you're focusing on.
Wow, yeah, that's pretty shallow. And that's not even like the MP65, the 5 times. A true macro is a 1-to-1 ratio. So
yeah, it's pretty fun. You can get some really, really interesting shots. I think it's just a fun lens. That's another reason I really like it. And I think I'll just do one more.
Sure.
Okay. There's a fun bubble shot here. There we go.
Yeah, it's certainly for these kinds of things, using the macro brings out all the detail. Well, Don, you know all about that.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah, and it's so much fun to explore the everyday things
Yeah.
with a macro lens because you have no idea how interesting like bubbles can be, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
I've used macros before where we've done a challenge. You know, you walk around work. Actually, we did this at work at Henry's. We just walk around with a macro lens and take really close-up pictures of stuff, and then you have to guess what it was. So.
Yeah, so it's a really, really neat lens, and I highly recommend it.
Very, very good. Well, thanks a lot, Navi. Great job, and thanks for sharing all those shots. It's really cool.
You're welcome.
Now, a reminder one more time, guys, if you're watching our show and you have any questions or comments, please chime in, post them in the Q&A, and we'll see them right away. We'll be able to talk about them during the show. And Gabriel, are you set to talk about your lens of choice?
Sure.
Well,
Yeah,
go
I've
for
got the tiny, lovable, cuddly. Let's see.
Dun, 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 dun,
Goes
dun,
on
dun,
and on and on. So it's the 7200 2.8, the L series, the one that whenever I'm shooting a wedding, somebody walks up and inevitably says, think you got a big enough zoom lens? I have to start explaining how it's not really a big zoom lens, and then I just kind of give up halfway through. So,
Talk about
there's
going
cake
after
over
the
there. I'm
low-hanging
going over
fruit
there.
there, Gabe.
so
What's that, Don?
Oh, I said that's the low-hanging fruit. The 70 to 200 is the most versatile lens, I think.
Oh.
Yeah, you could do so much with that thing.
It's incredible, and actually, in going through, one thing I love about Lightroom is that you can go into the attributes and say, okay, only show me the pictures taken with this camera and this lens, or with this lens. And I was going through it trying to find the requested 6 images for the show tonight. And like even going through my own pictures, I'm like, oh my God, I used that lens for that, and I used it for that, and I mean, it for the most part, it can be the only lens that you have. For the most part, if you buy it, it can be the only lens that you can afford.
I was just about to say that.
Yeah. The way I came about mine is I've been doing wedding photography for a long time, and every time there was a bigger wedding coming up, I would contact Headshots at the time and rent it. And then the tsunami hit, and it was a tsunami and the earthquake and everything like that. All the factories shut down, and this thing was rented like a year and a half in advance. And so I was talking to a contact of mine at Henry's, and I said, listen, I don't have the money, but can you put me on the waiting list? And he's like, he or she was like, I'll put you on the waiting list, but there's literally, I think it was 203 people in front of me or something like that. It was insane. And then a few days later, I got a phone call, and this undisclosed person was like, okay, listen, there's like 200 people in front of you, but I have one. If you're here in a couple hours, is yours. And I'm like, I don't know where I'm going to come up with the money, but I will be there in 2 hours. And so, yeah, I showed up.
What kind of idiot salesperson would do something like that?
I don't know.
200 people? Come on.
It's a good thing I'm not mentioning any names.
No kidding. I'd be fired or something.
That's way before my time, so definitely not me.
No. Okay, so classically, what does the 70 to 200 lens, what's it used for? What's the initial thing you think of? What everybody would think, oh, I need a 70 to 200. Why?
It's one of those lenses that kind of surprises you because 200 it's not really zoom enough for nature photography, and it's really heavy, so you don't think about it's heavy and big, so you don't think about using it for like family pour. Hey, we're going to the zoo. I'll bring the how much does this thing weigh? 3.2875 pound lens with me. So it's one of those lenses I think unless you're a professional or something, you don't really think about using at all, but it is good for everything. It is. I think that it's good for catching action in low light from far away. So, and that's what I primarily used it for in the beginning, was when I'm doing the wedding photography, Trish would be walking around with the 50 or the 24-105 or something like that, and I'd be on the other end of the either the church or the reception hall or something like that, getting pictures of people interacting in a totally non-intrusive way because I'm 20, 30 feet away. So it's fantastic for that. But what I found out is that you can use it for ring shots, you can use it for portraits, you can use it for nature photography. If you're up close enough, you can use it for pretty much anything. And a lot of times when I go out, if I know I'm not going to be out walking for a long, long time, it's the only lens I bring with me.
Can't hear you.
You're muted, Brian.
Can't hear you.
That again. I mute on my own mic. I don't mute on the thing. It's funny you say that you could use it for everything, because Bruce Clement, who Don and I knows, he says he uses it for everything.
Yeah.
So that is one of those lenses that people just use for everything.
Yeah, it's great. It's fast. I pretty much come to the conclusion that the slowest lens I will ever buy from here at this point on is 2.8, right? So, I want 2.8, 1.4, for like fast, shallow depth of field, and that's just sort of my style of photography. And so the 2.8 gives, great depth of field, but also, the focus on this thing is lightning fast. It's quiet. The low light focusing is unbelievable. This is the one I shot a hockey tournament, so I shot I think it was like 42 hockey games in 3 days. And with this lens on the 5D Mark III, I had 2 pictures out of focus.
Wow.
Well, and you made a very good point there, Gabe, about the f2.8, because in the case of that lens and any lens, even if you don't use it at f2.8, you'll find yourself in a situation at some point where you need it.
Yeah.
And maybe it's just a factor of low light, and then you're cranking your ISO up too high, and then you get a garbage image. Or maybe you just need to make the background a little bit more blurry. If you don't have it, you can't use it. Not that you're always using it at f2.8, but it's helpful to have.
Yeah, absolutely.
Bruce just says he uses it for weddings, portrait, macro, not just selfies. Literally everything.
Not selfies.
And actually, Bonnie has an interesting question. Bonnie asks us, what is the Nikon crop sensor equivalent of the 70-200? It's the 70-200. There is no equivalent. Okay, Bonnie, there is no equivalent. The 70-200 lenses from Nikon or Canon are both spectacular, and there's really nothing that comes close to what they do. Crop sensor equivalent just means, what would the focal length be for a 70-200 focal length on a crop sensor? What would that be, 50-150 or something? But realistically, that's not the point. The point is, if you want the 70-200 quality f2.8 lens and you want to use it on a crop sensor, buy the 70-200, use it on the crop sensor, ends up giving you 100 to what?
140.
320 or something?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
200 times 1.6, right?
1.5.
Yeah.
Nikon sensors are bigger than Canon, so I don't know.
Oh, right. Okay.
So, compensating! And I drive a Hummer H3.
So
Maureen says that she sees the Nikon version of 70-200 is 1,000 more than the Sigma. What's the real difference between the two?
I tried the Sigma. I bought the Sigma before I bought this lens, and I can't remember if I shot a wedding with it or not. I don't think I did, but it's just not. It's good. It is a good lens, and if you're not taking pictures that you're ultimately delivering to a customer, then I think it's a good lens. But they just weren't. It wasn't like if you take a picture with the Sigma and then you take a picture with the Canon 70-200. I mean, it's just the sharpness is mind blowing. The build quality, the speed, the quietness of it. It's just amazing. The image stabilization, everything. It's just the Sigma is a good lens if you're not delivering images to a client, I would say.
I think so. We usually tell customers.
That's a big jab there, isn't it, Gabe? Oh, it's great unless you're trying to sell the work that comes from it. Otherwise, then it's terrible.
See, my answer is
well,
this.
okay.
It's not a matter of that the Sigma's not good. It's a matter of if you can afford it, buy the brand name. If you can't afford it, you'll get amazing results with the off-brand, whether it's Sigma, Tamron, Tokina, whatever.
Right.
So,
Well,
yeah, and I would say even if you are delivering to a customer, it's good quality, but it's not up to my standards for delivering wedding photos.
at this point,
I think, well, if you're trying to compare very similar lenses, I always think, in the end, will your client notice a difference? Right?
Right.
So for some people, that's more important to us, yes, we can see it, but if you were to give the same picture shot with different lenses to your client, would they pick one over the other because, they notice something, or is it just, your own preference?
Right.
And some people, they're just hobbyists, and they don't want to spend $2,000 on a lens. They're just kind of on a telephoto that they can take out and, do nature shots or whatever, and they're fine with that. And I think that's fine too, right? And still a good lens. Yeah, just
absolutely. I'll tell you this though: if you buy one of the brand names, like Gary says, he hugs his Nikon 70-200. When you own one of those brand name lenses, you won't trade it for a Sigma. You won't trade it for a Tamron, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Exactly.
Guys, I love the Sigma. I love it. Just talking to Ron today. I'm going to borrow them for my trip up to Algonquin in May. I love the stuff, but there are some lenses that you buy the brand name and some lenses that you spend a little more. Andrew says he just got here. Hi, Andrew. Good to see you. Glad he's going to hear some of this. He wishes he was here from the beginning. I'll tell you what you missed. Navi got engaged. She got a job at Seneca College. Don's here. Gabe's here. I'm here. Oh, Sheridan. Sorry. Sheridan. She got a job.
I got a job, guys. I'm an adult almost.
And he says he likes his Sigmas for shooting that he does. Maybe one day he'll want better. But for now, they're good value for the little money that he has. And that's exactly what it is, isn't it, guys? Okay. Maureen, yes, some people actually like Canon. It's okay. Okay.
God.
Please forgive me.
Please forgive
Maureen gets the joke.
Three-quarters of the hosts on this podcast.
That's a good point. It's a very good point. All right. Okay, so excellent, Gabriel. Have you got some photos you'd like to share?
Sure. I would say the only just looking at the show notes, the cons.
Right.
It's expensive. I don't know about now, but they were very hard to come by. And the lens itself, by itself, weighs 3.2 pounds. So when I'm shooting a 12-hour wedding or something like that, by the end of the night, even with the rapid strap and stuff, I really feel it, especially if you've got the lens on a 5D Mark III, and then there's usually a flash and sometimes a battery grip and stuff. By the time you're done all that, the thing weighs 30 pounds. So.
I have
at least
the
6.
Nikon version here. This is the version 1 though, but pretty similar in size.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the Nikon.
Now remember, a lot of that size that you see there is the hood, but still.
Yeah. So this the hood.
Yeah.
There.
You just can't beat them. You can't beat them.
It's great for working out too, ladies and gentlemen.
As you can see, Gabriel's lost about 25 pounds, and all of that's just from carrying around that lens, I guess.
Only 22.
Oh, only 22. Okay.
So I couldn't pick 6, so I'm just going to go through them quickly and just breeze over a couple and then mention advantages with a couple others. So something like this, and I've got some other ones here where you can get close enough to not really be bugging an animal, but still, I mean, the detail on these shots are insane. They're just ridiculous. You can't see through the podcast, I'm sure, but and it's just bokeh-licious. It's just beautiful and buttery, which is really, the more I shoot, the more I realize how important that is to me. Just being able to get nice soft backgrounds and draw attention to exactly what I want the attention drawn to. This was a birthday party that we shot, and you always know when they cut the cake, there's family all around and everybody's got their phones out. With this lens, you can just stand on a chair behind everybody and shoot through the shoulders and zoom in and have it look like you're standing 2 feet away. It's super, this one I just turned around, this adorable little kid was just, smiling like that, and I shot it in half a second. Really, really nice depth of field. This was at a bar mitzvah, right? So you can get some really compelling looking images. This kid didn't even know I was there, so he's just playing around like he would. Sorry?
It's really great for these because sometimes kids would get really shy, so you can be, hiding out, hanging on the back.
Exactly. Intimacy without intimidation.
Yeah.
Really great for detail shots. So wedding shoes, shallow depth of field. Again, here, with most of my other lenses, this is a really, really dark church. It was really dark, and I was able to shoot nice and fast, be far away. They didn't know I was there, but I was getting some nice shots. This is at the Elbel Zoo. Trish getting licked by a giraffe, but it's also because it's fast, right? It's 2.8, but it's also 200. So I'm standing behind the fence here, and you go 2.8, and you zoom in, and the fence just blurs right away. It's great. Nice. This is what I'm talking about, the Bocalicious, just buttery backgrounds. And then you can also use it for, if you zoom in really far, you get that shallow depth of field, you can use it for kind of like a macro shot.
And this is what Bruce was saying, he uses it for macro and all kinds of things. This photo of the rings is similar to Navi's photo of the rings, shallow depth of field and so on. So you can get
one on a flower as well. Yeah, you can't get as close to get all the detail in the rock and stuff. This is one that I shot. I was just hanging out in the backyard with Jaden, and we just put up this bird feeder, and then this actually, a friend of mine, same person that found me that lens, coincidentally enough, sent this image in and ended up winning an award, which was kind of cool.
That person must really like you or something.
Or something like that, yeah. During a ceremony, I'm halfway down the aisle, and I'm zoomed in, and intimacy without intimidation, like I was saying. You can use it for portraits up close. It's crazy fast. You can capture action midway. This one here, I was on the other side of the restaurant while my friend's daughter was just eating her ice cream stuff. So it's just, you could just really, I found like 65 pictures. This was set up in a home studio. It's because it's 70 millimeter, you can still get far enough away to shoot in an indoor studio and still get some adorable pictures. So, and then, super low light. This was a really dark room. This was during the Hora dance at a bat mitzvah, right? And you can really still just crank it up and capture a lot of action. So yes.
So versatile. Great shots,
too. Sorry for going on, but I mean, I was surprised when I did a search for the lens, how many different types of scenarios that I use this lens for. It's really amazing.
I think that's something that we all found when we were trying to find our photos for this the show tonight, is that you look for 5 and you end up with 15. It's a really cool thing. I'm going to go to the Q&A for a quick second. Blake makes a really good point. He says focusing speed is important. Sometimes you need the speed and so on, but sometimes it's not just the brand that's better. Sometimes it's the specific lens, like the 50mm f1.4 from Canon versus the 50mm f1.4 from Sigma. The Sigma kills it, and there's a lot of other options like that where some brands are better. So that's a good point that you made there, Blake. However, that same breath, Julie, I was right there with Julie the whole time. She says that after owning the Sigma macro and now she owns the Canon macro, she will always buy the Canon. You can't compare the sharpness and quality. So, and that's absolutely true. Julie had a lot of issues with her Sigma. We sent it back. She got it back. It still had some issues. She eventually, we switched it to the Canon brand instead, and she loves it. Her photos are always so good, so that helps. Bruce, he says, for exercise and weight loss, to get back to all your weight loss there, Gabriel, he says he uses the Sigma 150 to 600 on his 5D Mark III. He had to actually hire a personal Sherpa to carry his own. Yeah, that's beefy. And, of course, Andrew and Bonnie both say congratulations, since they missed the beginning of the show, to you, Navi, on your job and everything else. What else here? Oh, Lou's angry at me now. So Lou says he heard lots about the 70 to 200 focal length at the Newmarket Camera Club meeting last night. Somebody at Henry's sold him a 70-300 f4.5. He says, what is it about the 70 to 200 versus the 70 to 300? Okay, I'll field this one.
100 millimeter less zoom.
There's that. But the 70-300 is actually a 5.6 at the far end. It's not the same kind of focusing speed. It's not nano-coated glass. It doesn't have the same kind of sharpness or speed of focus. I said focusing speed, but that's something I really want to stick on. And the sharpness between the two is night and day. However, the The 70 to 300 brand new is about $600. 70 to 200 brand new is $2,800. So it's not
32 and I got it. Yeah.
It's not. It's like comparing a Mercedes and a Chevy Cavalier. If you can't afford the Mercedes, then buy the Cavalier. It's going to be great for you. And that's
a bicycle, right?
What's that?
Better than a bicycle.
Well,
it's a car.
That's what I ride, but whatever.
Oh, my bad.
Thanks, Navi. Okay, so Lou says, please explain crazy fast.
She's engaged.
Okay, Lou, you're asking great questions tonight. He says, please explain crazy fast. Don, you've been quiet for a few minutes. Why don't you explain crazy fast?
Well, so like the difference between f2.8 and say f4 is one stop. So if you dial that difference in, one stop means a doubling or a halving of light. So f2.8 is twice as fast, meaning that it lets in twice as much light in order. So if you have, say, a shutter speed that's around, say, 1/20th of a second, and you're trying to use that lens, even with the image stabilization or vibration reduction, you're not going to get good results reliably. But if you have that at 2.8, then that becomes 1/40th of a second. You're still going to get a lot of misses in there, but you're going to have a much greater chance because now your shutter speed is twice as fast as it was. So you've got twice as much light. So that is what we mean when we say crazy fast. And to take that a step farther, from f2.8 to f1.8 is also a stop difference or so. And so when you're looking into Brian, and maybe that's a segue for you, when you're talking about a nifty 50, it's even faster still. And lenses from Nikon can go as fast as f1.4 on the automatic side. They can't do f1.2 because of the way the electrical contacts come in. On the Canon side, you can do f1.2, and they even experimented early on with f1.0. And if you've got about $12,000 kicking around, you can buy a Leica f0.95 and push it even farther, which, you know, that gets literally defining the term crazy in crazy fast.
Yeah.
But
and plus the fact that it focuses so fast.
Well, on the Leica it doesn't focus fast, but
no, I mean on the
Leica
7200.
Yeah, exactly. And so when we're talking about how fast it works, you can miss a moment in about a half a second. And so if you have to wait because the camera is focusing and it's going to take it a half a second longer, then you may have missed the moment. And so, you know, you need to work quickly, you need to capture quickly, and you need to just be in the moment and not have the gear stand in the way.
Mm-hmm. Well, it was a very good segue to my 50mm, but unfortunately, we're talking to you next, since you're already up. So, so why don't you tell us about the lens you chose, or some of the lenses? Obviously, you chose the concept, which is awesome. So go for it. What is the main reason that people generally use a fisheye lens?
Well, it's so funny because you see people when they take a lens out of the box for the first time and they try and take pictures. I've seen so many just almost nauseating photographs with a fisheye lens because they're used in the wrong way. If I were to photograph a room with a fisheye lens, the distortion that's introduced is just so huge that the walls bend to like C shapes almost, and so you have to find the right subject for it. But it has the widest field of view of any lens you'll be able to get your hands on, and sometimes that wide field of view is exactly the ticket to make some magical photographs. Even like, say if you were to have a 14mm lens that's rectilinear, that kind of gives you straight lines, its field of view might be at the most, say, like 100 to 110 degrees, whereas a fisheye lens is 180 degrees from corner to corner.
So that's wider than a GoPro.
Yeah, and so you have an unbelievable field of view for you to capture things that are right on the periphery of the scene. Some subjects work excellent for that, and they just they thrive within it, you know. So I'll show you a couple examples here, and I'll talk about the benefits, the pros, and the cons as we go through the examples.
Sure.
So I'll do a screen share of the Lightroom, so you should be able to see this here now. So to create this this particular photograph, if it's up for you there, guys.
Yep, good to go.
Yep, okay. This is taken from a helicopter above Toronto, and so here I am. I actually have to hang out of the helicopter quite a ways in order to make this shot, because the 180-degree field of view would have the helicopter in the frame if the camera was in the helicopter. And so I have to get it sort of beyond that threshold and hang out as far as I possibly can with the camera. But this creates, you can see the curvature because the camera is angled slightly downward. And so every fisheye lens is going to come up with curves and lines that wouldn't be normally seen in that particular kind of an image. But in this case, I think that it works really well. It kind of gives it a small planet effect in here. And because I've got that wide field of view, I have the boats on the lower left-hand side, and I've got all the sort of the horizon line that extends way out from there. If this was on any other lens from the positioning that I was, I might have a cutoff at these condos here just to the left of the I'll still call it the Sky Dome, and then and then sort of the condos here on the right. You wouldn't have anything that would extend beyond that, and you'd be missing part of the picture. In this case, the wider the better is the solution, and the fisheye lens is the widest lens that you could possibly use. So there's food for thought within that. I've done some experimenting with it. This is one of those experiments that didn't really work out so well, but I wanted to put it in here because it's a different way to use it. It can be used as a macro lens. I put an extension tube in between the fisheye lens and the camera. This was the smallest extension tube that you can get in the Kenko sets. I think it's a 12mm extension. And I set my focus to infinity. And this is as far away as the camera is able to focus. The stamens of this red trillium are touching the front of the lens. And so you can do it. You can play around. I can take some really interesting and abstract macro shots with a fisheye lens by putting a very, very small extension tube on it and getting ridiculously close to a subject. So just to say that it is versatile beyond just the wide angle element of things, you've got some choices and some fun things you can do. I've used it for portraiture before. Anybody know what this kind of a shot is called?
Is that
I've heard it. I just
the
can't
Colby
think of it.
ring shot or something like that?
No, it's a Jarvie window.
Jarvie window, that's right.
Yeah, so Scott Jarvie came up with the idea of putting a ring flash on a fisheye lens and trying to peer into it and almost walk through it. And so I couldn't resist. I had to experiment with that. And so there's my experiment with it. Yes, it's kind of creepy, but there's a lot of fun things, experimental things that a fisheye lens can do. And so I had that idea. And this is done actually with a circular fisheye lens, which is even wider. The other ones were, but before I got to these two, were rectilinear. They had the full frame in. But here, now I've got a circular image, and it's even wider still because it's not cropping it off on the standard rectangle that would be inside. And so this is an experiment that I'm really quite happy with. It's an infrared photograph of me at a landscape with a circular fisheye lens, and I'm holding up a particular filter. This filter is a hot mirror filter, which I don't think any of you have had the opportunity to use.
No.
But I think I mentioned this photo, or I might have showed it in a previous show. It reflects infrared light only. It lets visible light pass straight on through. So it lets the infrared camera use it as a mirror. And so I'm holding it up on the side, and I can get myself in behind the camera when I'm taking the picture. So that was kind of a fun little experiment as to how you can really push those limits and have some fun with it. And this is the shot that I was setting up to take that day, actually, in infrared. This is done in Killarney Provincial Park. It's a star trail over about an hour or so, having the stars sort of moving along. As they do, because the Earth is spinning. The North Star can just barely be seen up at the top of the frame, and everything kind of spins around that. And so that's it. This is a weird lens. It's not for everyday use. I couldn't use this lens for anything around my house. I couldn't use it for a wedding. I couldn't use it for at least ordinary portraiture or product photography or anything that you would normally think of that's sort of drawing inside the lines of photography. But I was looking through, just like Gabe had done, to see the images that I had taken with this particular lens, or these fisheye lenses, and I found this one, which might be familiar to some people in the audience, some people watching. We've got some familiar faces in here from a photo walk in Toronto, and so there we all are, and we're all having a good time. There's Ron back there waving.
There he is.
And of course all you guys in the foreground.
Jody and Julie and Cheryl.
And so this turned out to be like the quirkiest, silliest kind of image. You know, I don't even know if I shared it. I think I might have, but it's weird and fun to explore the world in a way that we can't see with our own eyes. And so a fisheye lens kind of provides that window into a different realm.
So what's the field of view for the human eye?
Field of view is about 44 millimeters.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. Well, that's the focal length. Field of view is it can't be measured in static terms because we have our peripheral vision that kind of comes in right on the edges that like we can almost see in fisheye terms because I can hold my hands. Of course, you guys can't see me doing this. But, I can hold my hands way out to the sides of my head, and you know when I'm doing that, yeah, Brian, do that. You can see, looking straight, you can see your hands there.
Yep.
So
Yep.
we might have that same field of view, but we don't see the world the same way as a camera. So we have to really change our concept of how that's interpreted within our own heads, within our own minds.
Cool.
So yeah, so there's some fun ones. This is actually wider than a fisheye lens because this is a fisheye panorama. From the top of a tower in an abandoned communist headquarters in the mountains of Bulgaria. And so my wife and I, on our honeymoon, Navi, take notes because you can take your husband-to-be to places like this. We
Mall, that's it. Just Upper Canada Mall. It's fine.
Yeah. So we climbed up this tower, which was like 26 steps in like a concrete coffin because there's no windows until you get to the little broken star area. And then I looked over the edge and it was just the most beautiful landscape. But how would I be able to capture the landscape and the place that I was at the same time? I held my camera out over the edge, put it on a 10-second timer, and put it out over the edge on the tripod and kind of held it out as far as the tripod could go, and I just kept fishing it out farther and farther and farther. Until I was worried that the tripod legs would snap, and that would be a very long fall for the camera. So then I took a picture and was happy with it, but it needed to be wider. So I pulled it back in, angled it down a little bit, took another picture, angled it up a little bit, took another picture, and stitched them together as a fisheye panorama. So this is greater than a 180-degree field of view to get everything into
Kind of trippy. Like you're trying to figure out like what the gray part is, like where you are.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of cool.
Yeah, it was kind of a fun experiment to play with, and I've done a lot of panoramas with fisheye lenses. Here's another one in the Yukon. In order to get an extended field of view, because the northern lights weren't in a good alignment, I wanted to get sort of the side of the tent, sort of to kind of simplify that part of the composition. And I wanted to have the Milky Way kind of in that orientation, but I wanted to have all the stuff on the right side of the frame too. If this was just a single frame, it might have stopped about just shy of halfway across. And so I needed to extend this. This is almost a 360-degree view all the way around. It falls a little bit short, but you can't. It's not perceivable that way because I've kind of adjusted for all the distortion that would be introduced, and that distortion is a real pain to deal with because this is the most complicated one I've ever done with a fisheye lens. This is an HDR fisheye grid panorama. So the fisheye lens is on the camera, and I'm moving it around into different portions of the inside of that building that I would climb the tower of. This is the inside of it. A very similar shot is behind me, which you'll see when I stop the screen share. This was our second attempt there. And so when you have geometry, when you have straight lines like architecture, and you're trying to use a fisheye lens, it's very disconcerting because they'll all bend into different ways. And so in this case, I'm using fisheye lenses with distortion around the edges of the frame, and I'm trying to put it all together. So it was a bit of a nightmare. But you can do panoramas with fisheye lenses, and it's kind of fun. Here's another shot that I really like how it turned out. Brian, you were with me when I made this image.
Mm-hmm.
Brian, why don't you tell me how close the camera was to the action?
Well, that's the cool thing. We purposely planned to get stupid, and we pretty much put the camera right in harm's way. So I don't know. You were maybe 3 feet from those pipes. If that?
I'd say 2.5, maybe even closer. But so the camera is really, really close to these pipes. But I wanted to get them to fill the frame and to get as close to that spinning steel wool as possible, in order to just have lines going everywhere through the frame. And I think I got that. You know, it was able to make the composition that I was after, and I had to work painstakingly to correct for the distortion along the straight lines of the pipes to make the pipes actually look straight instead of bent.
I was going to say it's deceiving that it was even a fisheye because of that.
Yeah, but you can see in the background there's little hints of it, because if you look up here, this line in the background, that one's still curved. Right? You can still see some of it back there, but the hardest part was to make the lines of the sparks not be deformed when I'm using a lot of push and pull tools like the liquefy tool and the warp tool to manipulate the positioning of different elements within the frame. And so, but this is done with a fisheye lens, very, very close, and you can do some pretty crazy stuff with it. And one more that I wanted to talk about today is this guy here, which I just spent most of today editing. And this is a shot that I had made in September, but didn't put it together until just now. And talking about sort of our theme for curves, right? I figured, well, this would be a perfect example, and using a fisheye lens. So this is a combination. I shot about almost 700 frames until the battery of the camera died, and of the northern lights just flying over. They were just dancing across left and right, and some much brighter than others, but they were everywhere through the night sky in the northern Yukon. And I wanted to try and do this as a time-lapse video, and very successfully I've done that. But I thought, you know, the time-lapse video and the still photos, they're just not showing kind of the magic of seeing it like dancing and shimmering and almost shivering through the sky. And so I thought, well, what happens if I put them all together as if I was putting together a star trail photograph? So I loaded all 700 images into Photoshop. It's the biggest sort of stack of different frames I've ever done, and changed the blending mode to lighten, which will reveal the brightest areas of any image in the sequence. And so if the northern lights are brighter in one area, they'll show up in that part of the frame from that particular photograph. If they're brighter in another area in another photograph, they will show up in the final construct. And so I put that all together, and I was just, like, my jaw dropped, and I said, I have to put in the time to work on it. Because the horizon, again, I have to make that straight, because normally it would be curved with the fisheye lens. But I had to keep the accurate curves of the stars in the sky, which, you know, editing nightmares ensue. But the end result, I think, speaks for itself. I think it's a magical image, if there ever was one.
Certainly keeps you looking around in the frame. It's really cool.
Yeah.
So I guess it's safe to say that there's generally a lot of editing needed to get what you specifically desire from a fisheye. It's not the kind of thing where you can just grab your fisheye, go around town, and make that kind of stuff.
Not really. Oh, well, the first shot that I had shown of Toronto, very little editing required. Almost none. I cropped it, and I think I just edited some color as you would for any photograph. But to say that the images need a lot of editing is not true, because it requires a lot of time and patience and sort of dedication to get the right things happening.
I think you cut out there a second when you just started speaking there, so just repeat what you just said so everybody hear it. Sorry. Yeah,
sorry. I was saying that it's not that the fisheye lens requires editing, it's that my style of photography requires editing.
Fair enough.
I push limits in many different ways, and so I'm using this tool to push things very far, and then the software pushes it even farther. But you can do some pretty fun stuff with one of these lenses. The trick is, don't use it often. Don't take it out every day when you're walking around with it, because if you show a lot of fisheye shots that look like fisheye shots, people looking at them will be nauseated by it. And so it can be a terrible effect. It can ruin a good photograph by using this lens, but it can make a great one in the right situations. So,
especially if you look behind you, like you were saying, now that you're off your screen share, I mean, turning that photo into a triptych, making it, printed, have it nice and, really printed well, and behind you there, it's a completely different feel that you just wouldn't get.
Well, and you see my camera behind me as well, and that has the 15mm f2.8 fisheye lens from Canon. On occasion, I've rented their 8 to 15, which is their zoom fisheye lens, which will give you the full circular on one side or the full frame version, depending on what you need. But it's f4, and sort of like what Gabe was saying earlier about never buying any lens that's slower than f2.8. I'm reluctant to upgrade because I get twice as much light coming in from the very aged 15mm fisheye, and I actually had to send it in for repair. And the repair guys at Canon said, "Well, we don't sell it anymore. It might be out of service." And I said, "Please, I don't care what basement you have to dig through to find whatever. You need to fix this lens."
Well, it's like when you do the Star Trails and that, you shoot 2.8, you shoot 30 seconds or longer depending on what you're doing, but generally you're shooting at 2.8, and f4 would change everything.
The benefit of the fisheye lens is a lot of people get this wrong. Focal length is a lot of people think focal length is an element that controls aperture or depth of field. Aperture, focal length, and distance from the subject are three different things, but it's not actually focal length. So if you have a wider field of view, you will have a greater depth of field at any given aperture. So I might be shooting an entire night landscape with this fisheye lens at f2.8, and I've got the waves in the foreground in focus, and I've got the stars in the background in focus at f2.8. You've got almost everything. Like if something was maybe a foot from the camera, it would be blurry, but everything is sharp. And so I can have a lot of light coming in and a very sharp image as a result. But there are the downsides. You can't use this for everything. I use it for the stars specifically because it gives me more stars in the sky, right? You want to have as many of them as possible, especially if you're trying to photograph something like the Milky Way.
Yeah, for sure. Excellent. Beautiful photos, as always, and thank you for your explanations of everything. We're going to go to the Q&A for a quick second here. Lou says, when comparing and assessing lenses, what is the spec for focus speed? I don't know of one. I think it's just the technology in the lens, yeah?
Right, yeah. You try it out and learn.
There's no solid metric because if it all depends. Like a lot of different lenses will have a limiter for a macro mode, whereas if you turn that mode on, then it will actually shift its focus hunting to even closer to the camera than further away, and it takes longer to focus when that mode is enacted, which means that if one lens focuses really, really quickly, but it has a closer focusing distance, if it misses the focus once, it might take a lot longer to find it back and forth because it has to run through that whole focal range, and if it has a longer range, it takes more time. So it's a relative construct. It's not something that you can put to a proper scale and compare, and it'll offer different results based on the kind of subject that you're photographing as well.
Now, however, that being said, usually f2.8 lenses are made with such high quality, with such fast focusing motors and so on, that they do focus very quickly, so you can assume that the L series lenses from Canon or the nano lenses from Nikon would be faster focusing than the non-versions of those. Bob says, which do you prefer, telephoto or prime lens? And do the number of elements in a lens make a difference to the sharpness of the image?
Okay, so that's an interesting question. So telephoto or prime, most telephoto lenses, like in the extreme range, are going to be a prime lens. So when you get into the 400, 500, 600, they don't zoom as often. Now some of them do. Tamron and Sigma make, I think, a 150 to 600 kind of lens, and so there are a few of them in that range. If you're talking about that regard, if you are keen on the best optical quality and the widest apertures, a prime lens is your ticket. If you want to have flexibility in framing your subject, a zoom lens is your ticket, and you'll be compromising a little bit on optical quality. The zoom lenses will often have more elements, and sometimes they'll have to add in complex optical formulas like aspherical lens elements and fluoride elements and all sorts of other coatings to compensate for any of the, I don't want to say defects, because you're compromising to get something, but it depends on what you're doing. Like my 24 to 105 stays on my camera 90% of the time, and then I experiment with other lenses when the need arises. But the lens, and I'm sure this is true for a lot of people, the lens that is most often on their camera is not going to be a prime lens. You're going to stick with a good prime that's very versatile, or sorry, you're going to stick with a good zoom that's very versatile, and then use a prime when the situation demands it, or when you know, with a certain margin of error that your subject will be captured accurately on this lens, and you'll get better results than compromising. Does that answer the question? I kind of rambled there.
No, it answers it very well. And Julie just has to let you know that she loves that photo, and yes, you did share it. The
I
photo
think
of
I
the
did,
infrared of
yeah.
everybody? Yeah.
Yeah, so but that would have been like a day after the photo walk last year,
It's
and
been a
so
while.
it's probably disappeared into the bowels of the internet by now. But that brings up an odd question, Brian. Do you know if there's going to be a photo walk this year?
I have no clue.
Well,
But if it's on the same day as it was last year, my birthday, I'll go.
yes, and the day before my birthday.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay, now, Gabe, I know you have to get going. You've got a young one that gets up early in the day. Did you want to go, or do you want to just stick by for a couple seconds? I'll go through mine, and then we'll say adios.
I can stay for about 5 more minutes.
Okay, cool. So I'll start into the Nifty 50. So here's the lens that I chose, guys. This guy here, the 50 millimeter f1.8 G. Now, everybody so far has talked about lenses that are $1,000 or more. Fair?
You can the 15 millimeter fisheyes out of stock right now. If you buy them used, they're about 800. So
there you go. So the thing that I did was I went for a lens that cost me $250. You can actually get them right now for about $220. They're not expensive. And what I love about the 50, first of all, it's small. It's very compact. It's a 1.8 aperture, so as we've been talking about, it's a fast lens. You get a lot of light that will boink, get right through there, and it gives you a nice wide aperture opening. Obviously, mine's a bit dirty right now. I will clean that properly later. But yeah, the 50 is very compact, it's very small, and it's easy to walk around with. So if I'm shooting, this is my kit. I usually have it on my hip, pop it in there, and if I need to shoot, I grab it out, I take my picture, and then I put it away. So for street photography, for going to the CNE, or walking around on Canada Day, anything like that, I love that lens for it. Now, some people actually call it a portrait lens, and you walk into the store, you ask for a portrait lens. And normally you're thinking about the Canon $120 Plastic Fantastic, or you're thinking about something like this. But what we start talking to you about would be a 70 to 200 f2.8 or a 100 macro or something like that. Normally, the classic focal length for portrait, as we said earlier, is 75 to 100 mil or further, and this doesn't apply. So if Ross were on our show right now and I were to say this is a portrait lens, I would feel his punch through the screen. Just going to say that. However, if you walk into the store and you look behind the counter and you see the Canon portrait lens kit, it's a 50 mil f1.4 with a remote control. Anyway, what I like this for is not necessarily portrait. However, my favorite portrait of my wife Shelley was taken with this lens. So I'll show you that in just a couple seconds. And also, I love the 50 mil for seeing details. Again, walking around on Canada Day, there's a street vendor selling his wares, nice bright colors and details. I can use a 50 for that and help me really isolate focus. The pros of a lens like this, super compact. I find it extremely flexible, super cheap, and you know what? It's inset so far, you don't need to have a filter to protect your lens right there on the surface. And I know this is going to sound kind of funny. When people buy a 50 from me, the first thing I suggest you buy with it is not a filter. Just putting that out there.
I never buy filters, Brian. I think we've had this discussion before.
Yep.
We don't need to bring it up again.
No. I agree with it for the most part, to be honest. I use polarizers. I use neutral densities. They're creating visual impact in my image. Clear filters, maybe if you're spending money on like a $1,000 lens or something and you want to protect that glass, get a good quality filter and do it that way. But it's a personal preference. I'm certainly not going to yell at anybody when they don't want to buy a filter. It's fine. So that's my thing. Who are we getting echo from? What just changed?
I don't know. It's not me.
I think it's gone now.
Oh, okay. So there's that. Now, the cons of a 50 mil, it is a fixed focal length. If I need to get closer to something, I have to walk closer to something. So an example of this, I was at the CNE, and as I say, I always walk around with this thing at the CNE or whatever, and the Great Wallendas were there, and they were on their high rope doing their thing. And I was taking pictures of the Great Wallendas on their high rope, but all I had was a floating person. There was no reference. You couldn't see how high they were. You couldn't see how far they had to walk. So I ended up flipping it into video and doing a little video to give that kind of impression. So there are certain things that a 50 just will not work well at. However, there's ways around that. Panoramic. like Don does. You can do a panoramic photo and stitch it afterward and get that full big view if you need to. And I do have a panoramic I'll share in just a second. Now, another thing is you do have to be a little bit more accurate with your focusing when you're shooting wide open, f1.8. If I'm taking a picture of my cat and she's playing and the sun's on her and I take that picture, I can focus on the tip of her nose, not her eyes, extremely easily. So something you have to be a little bit more careful on.
I think that I found with the 1.4 that I love the 1.4. I use it all the time, but it's not very good at focusing in low light, which is annoying because it's such a great low light lens.
Yeah.
It takes fantastic low light pictures once you can get focus, and more than once I found myself going into manual mode and focusing in manual.
I've heard that about the 51.4.
A lot of lenses will have issues with low light. The ones that are good at it cost a lot of money. We're talking over $2,000 for sure. And so, it's a compromise just based on the cost of the lens and what it can offer. If you want more, there are products available for you.
Well, the Sigma 51.4 actually focuses quite well in low light, but it's twice the price of the Canon. So it's like you say, you pay more for it.
Well, and so that's twice the price, sure. But I was talking like even more versatile lenses, like some of the other primes that go to f2, like even 200mm f2 lenses. They're even slow at doing focus, and so double that price to get a good one. But is there anything? Well, not really in that range.
Yeah.
So it's kind of difficult to find anything that works well, and you're always going to be second guessing it, even if it does work well in low light. I remember shooting a wedding. I was just a guest at a wedding, and of course I brought my camera along, and I was using the Canon 85mm f1.2 that I had rented for the occasion. It didn't focus in low. That's an expensive lens. It failed so miserably, and so I found myself using live view and zooming in and focusing on that when I was trying to get stuff, and it was a nightmare to get the focus anywhere reliably accurate.
Yeah.
And that was a fairly expensive and well-regarded lens, but they all have their shortcomings.
That's probably one of the lowest focusing lenses for, especially in low light. Even the 85-1.4 Nikon, terrible autofocus in low light.
And yet the 85-1.8 is not bad. It's just weird because I used the 85-1.8 to shoot a wrestling event, and it was awesome. I was at the curtains shooting way off into the stage, and it did quite well. I think
that has to do with the weight of the glass elements inside the lens.
I see. Lou just says that he lost video for a bit and he missed the answer about the fast focus spec. There isn't a fast focus spec, and for the actual explanation of that, just rewind back the video afterward on YouTube there, Lou, because we are already over our time, so we want to kind of keep it short. So I'm just going to keep going a little bit, and by all means, Lou, just play that back and you'll see all that there. Some unique things you can do with the 50mm lens. One cool thing about the 50 f1.8D, the D, not the G that I'm using here, is you can reverse mount it. You can get a 52mm ring adapter and reverse mount it, and it becomes a macro. Free lensing. Take the lens off your camera and you can tilt it around and get some cool effects. And of course, as I said a few seconds ago, you could do the panoramic. So why don't I do my screen share, and I will show you some images that I've made with the 50 in the past. I've only got one or two. All right, so here we go. First, let's just start off with one of the first images I've made. This is actually a Sony 50mm that I used just at the fair. I set it up on a tripod, did a 2-second exposure, and got that image that you see here. One thing that you'll notice about a 50mm is it's not really, really wide. It's not too wide, so you're getting that kind of thing. However, if you do the panoramic, this is actually an 8-image panoramic that I made with the 50mm inside of a cell, and it's a 6x9 cell. This is at the Kennedy Detention Center in Uxbridge. It's now flattened, but with my 50mm on me, that's all I brought with me. I couldn't really see very wide, so I shot 4 rows at the top, 4 photos at the bottom, stitched them together, and made the panoramic. Of course, I added the lens flare, and I thought it was cool, you know. For details, I mentioned details at the fair. This is a vendor selling these fancy skirts with all these little baubles all over them, and I thought they were interesting. So I took a picture at shallow depth of field and got focus in a very small part, and I let the texture and I let the flow of the baubles, I guess you could say, lead around the shot. Now, you don't necessarily need to do close-up stuff. You can use a 50 millimeter for landscape or for wider shots. It's just not necessarily going to give you really wide. It's just you have to step back further and keep on moving and fall into the lake and stuff. But that's okay. That's fine. So this is just a wide shot of the fair itself. Actually, this is Main Street in Newmarket. Shooting at 1.8 was probably not the best choice for this because, as you can see, it's not a fisheye. So you're not going to get such depth of field, and you have less focus in the front, less focus in the back, and a thin row focus in the center. Now, my favorite shot I've ever shot of my wife. This is at the Bradford Nighttime Christmas Parade. So this is on my full frame. This is 50. This is not 75 like it would be on the shorts that I have here beside me. So 50 millimeters, 1.8 aperture, no flash, handheld. Just shot at higher ISO, and I was able to make a really clear shot. But what's really nice about this is that everything in the background disappears. So Shelley just stands out, and that happy expression, because everybody who watches this show knows Shelley's an elf, and she loves Christmas. So she was just bursting at this moment, and I think the photo captured that. Another example of using the shallow depth of field to your benefit is shooting in a big fair where you want one person to stand out. You can shoot with a 1.8 aperture and be fairly close to the guy playing guitar and have that really nice separation of background and foreground. Zombie walk, guys. You guys all know I love the zombie walk. Here we have a shallow depth of field, and the hand coming out is totally out of focus, but the people's face, at least the gentleman in the background, I probably shouldn't even use the term gentleman. The zombie in the background is nice and sharp, and you lose focus as it comes closer. So it almost gives you a sense of motion and depth, and it's really kind of cool. I mentioned the free lensing thing. Free lensing is where you take the lens off the camera. This was shot during our naked photography episode that we did a while back, and I just literally closed myself in the bathroom and took pictures until I had 20 that I liked, and these are unedited, straight out of the camera, and I just thought it was really neat, the glistening effect and that nice clear, not really curved or stretched kind of image. What else can you do with a 50? Well, all kinds of stuff. There's Martin at work, shallow depth of field. I put a flash in front of him, flipped it to black and white. Oh, just walking around. I was teaching a customer. I went to her place. She lives in a farm, and we just took a little walk outside, and I saw this trillium, and I thought, hey, I've got my 50 on here. Let's get down there and get the shot. And it just really blurred out the background. Really nice and fun to shoot with. I mentioned to you about being careful with focus. I don't know if you can see in the podcast, but the gentleman playing the drums is soft, where the drums themselves are sharp. So here's where my contrast detection picked up the drums and totally didn't focus on the guy playing in the background. I moved my focus point to him. It should have focused on him. However, it missed. So these are where you have to be a little bit more careful with your depth of field and your shallowness that you're going to get. And this is for Jennifer if she's watching. Jennifer, this is Dixie. Yeah, she's having a good time. Have you guys ever seen? Oh yeah, have you ever seen teeth like this?
They look vicious.
She is a funky kitten, I tell you. So anyway, didn't focus on the eyes. It focused on her nose, closest, most vivid thing. Autofocus picked that up, and that's where it focused. But with a deeper depth of field, I would have been able to save some of the detail in her eyes and so on. So this is my point with the 50 is you do have to be a little bit more careful with your shallow depth of field. However, when you get that shallow depth of field in, and your focus is where it should be, it's a much better photo. And there's Dixie again. And one last Dixie photo for Jen. Oh!
Your focus isn't where it should be on that one, though. It's on a cat.
I can mute you again, you know.
There, Brian.
What's that?
Blanket. There should be more focus on the blanket you have.
Yes, it should be on the blanket, shouldn't it? Anyway, that's what I love about the 50. It's compact. It's super easy to shoot with. You can take it anywhere. It's not going to take up a lot of kit, and it's a fun lens. I sold a 50mm f1.2 about a week ago. The guy left the store and returned it in Scarborough because he says it was way more money than he wanted to spend. $1,300 used for a 51.2, where I could get amazing results with a $220 50 f1.8 not the same. I'm not going to say it's the same. You guys know it's not. But you could do a lot of cool things. All right, so any thoughts or questions before we get closer to the end of our show here, guys?
Well, one comment to say about the difference between, say, like an f1.2 and an f1.8 is the difference is actually less than you expect on modern cameras. And I wish I had a propeller hat around me for this next statement, but give me...
You'll have one for the Photo Expo, trust me. I'll
Okay.
have one for you.
Give me a minute here. When you've got a CMOS sensor, the light is picked up into like a little bucket, right? And so if light is coming in on a very strong incident angle, it'll hit the side of that bucket rather than the bottom, and it doesn't get detected properly. So when you have extremely wide apertures, there is a diminishing return from it that doesn't match the exact, I guess, f-stop numbers that we would expect. Less light is coming through. So I did a test when I had that 85 f1.2, and I took a picture of just a blank wall out of focus, just as a point of comparison. And okay, I got that exposure, perfect. And then what I did is I dismounted the lens ever so slightly, so that the lens couldn't talk to the camera body. The camera didn't know what lens was attached and what aperture was being shot with. And I took another picture. The second picture was noticeably darker than the first. So the camera manufacturers are artificially brightening these images at these extremely wide apertures to compensate for the effect of CMOS sensors that are making the light kind of fall off onto weird ways and isn't being detected properly. And this is not reflected in any way in the EXIF data of the camera. So there's some shenanigans going on behind the scenes.
Shenanigans?
To artificially brighten up these images, and I'd really, really like to get my hands on like that, like I had mentioned, that Leica Noctilux 0.95, and see if Leica's doing anything about that. Because now, what is the point? Why are you spending so much money? Even the Canon f1.0, I'd like to see the difference between that versus the 1.2 and 1.4, and do a study to figure out exactly where that fall off happens.
Well, you're definitely the right guy to do that study, so that would be really cool. All right, well, that's a great point. Thanks for sharing that, Don, and thank you, Gabriel, Navi, of course, as always, for sticking with us and being such awesome people and helping out with Daytripper and the show and everything. It's been a fun show tonight, everybody. Thank you so much for joining in the Q&A. That's pretty much it for us tonight. However, before we go, I'd just like to remind you of your photo challenge this week and for next week. It's still curves. So if you're out there making photos for our photo challenge and you haven't submitted them yet, curves is your challenge. And I can't wait to see what everybody's doing. There's been some great photos already submitted for the challenge in our I was about to say our cohort in our community, and I really appreciate everybody's efforts and so on. Thank you both, Navi, Gabriel, of course, as always, and Don. Thank you so much for being on the show tonight. It was a lot of fun. I had a great time. But it's 11 o'clock, and it's time to say goodnight. So, Navi, good night.
Good day.
No, it's night. Good night.
Good day.
Okay. And Gabriel, good day. You're so Canadian. And Gabriel, good night.
Good night.
Good night. Don, good
Have
night.
a great night, Brian. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
You're welcome.
Take 10 more seconds. I do want to say to anybody that's interested in my macro work to check out my website, because I have some workshops running right now in a number of different areas. One of them is water droplet refractions, and I sold out the first 2 workshops I listed, so I put a third one up today, I think for July 26th.
Yeah, because
so
it's not cool enough
that.
for people to want to register for this. It's not even like remotely cool at all.
So this is exactly the kind of image that people can expect to make, from those workshops. It's kind of fun. And Brian, we're doing one. I think we've got a tentative date set, but I don't know if we can even talk about it just yet.
Sure, we can talk about it.
August 9th is the tentative date, and we're going to have a day-long sort of macro photography workshop, but all the details are to come, so that'll be fun as well. That's through Daytripper.
Yes, I'm blessed. It's awesome that Don is doing this with us. So, yeah, August 9th is our macro session with Don Komarechka up in Barrie, and we'll have more information posted on the website as soon as possible. Andrew, I'm glad you love the show, and thank you for watching, and that's it for us. Navi, Gabriel, anything you'd like to add before we say goodnight?
Nope.
I'm looking forward to the that workshop at Dawn's.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
And speaking of workshops, before we say goodnight, just a reminder that we do have a workshop this Sunday. It is the Falconry, the Birds of Prey workshop. We're actually going to be doing it at Shepherd's Bush one last time. After this workshop, we're going to be moving it to Bender and Graves. They have a much more open area, but we didn't get our permits for that area yet, so we're going to be doing it at Shepherd's Bush, and it's going to be a blast. That's what we've done it before.
So really, this is the last of the sucky locations. So.
Yes, the last of the sucky. Yeah.
You really know how to market things, Brian.
No, the thing is, Shepherd's Bush is amazing because you can just get it there very easily. We've done them there, 3 or 4 times now, and it's always extremely successful. But I'd love a little bit more flight path for the birds to fly, so that's where we're going to move it to the other one. The problem is the other one is right next to a dog park. And, yeah,
so it's
Birds
like
of Prey.
Built-in food.
Exactly.
Okay, everybody focus on the Chihuahua, because it's going bye-bye.
Talking about photo ops. Anyway, this Sunday, there's still a few spots open. Ross Chevalier will actually be there helping. And Gabriel, you're going to be there?
Yeah, I'll be there.
Yes. Gabriel will be there as well. So Gabriel and Ross will both be there, as well as myself.
With my 7200.
Yeah, and Sigma lenses, too. So.
Okay,
guys.
That's right.
All right.
Yeah. That's it. We're going to say goodnight. It's 11:02, and we are way past. So good night, everyone, and see y'all next week. Don't forget curves.
Good night, Jimmy.
Bye-bye.